Hey, no surprise, we're in our California garden again. Look at this jungle of native plants. I'm not gonna get into all of these sunny yellow asters around me at the moment. We'll talk about that in another video. I have a little bit of a seasonal kind of public service announcement on behalf of native plants in a certain way. This plant in my hand, this vining plant, you've probably started to see this show up in all sorts of weird nooks and crannies throughout the county or throughout Southern California. And I want to tell you about what's going on here. So this plant is known as wild cucumber. It's Marah macrocarpa, and it actually is in the same family, 𝘮𝘢𝘳𝘢𝘤𝘳𝘰, as true cucumbers, as squash, as melons. And so you might recognize kind of the vining habit a little bit, cucumber-esque, and the leaves actually do resemble something like a squash leaf. This plant is amazing. There's all kinds of different ways that plants in our area adapt to our long, dry, stressful summers. And the way that this species does that is by having a huge tuber underground, a big storage organ that looks like a jicama kind of, or a giant lumpy potato. And during the summer, this plant completely disappears. But during our wetter and cooler season, at least we hope it's wetter, they surge out of the ground. And it seems like they come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're sprawling and they're covering plants right and left. And what I'm seeing a lot of, unfortunately, is people mistakenly taking this as an invasive species. So I want to tell you a little bit about how we deal with wild cucumber, which I wish that I could share the aroma with you, but you're going to have to come and visit to experience that yourself. This plant does sprawl and climb and kind of, in some cases, take over other shrubs, but it rarely does it in a problematic way if the plants that it's growing on are healthful, robust, and mature specimens. So what we do is do not arbitrarily strike this plant. Don't just yank this thing off of other plants for the sake of doing so. And please do not dig out those tubers. They might take 25 years to grow to that size. However, given that we're in the midst of so many different rare plants, endangered species, some actually composed exhibits that we don't want compromised by just a giant wall of Marah, we do, in some cases, remove it from plants that are rare or particularly showy or sensitive. And I actually have incorporated this piece for the display's sake here. So given the beauty of these flowers and the fact that this wild cucumber is just getting started, in your own garden, it might warrant actually pulling this off of this plant, for example, but it doesn't warrant eradicating this native species. In fact, this plant has all kinds of fascinating features to it. The seeds have rich ethnobotanic history. They've been used for fishing and different things. They're hard enough that they're ornamental and be drilled as beads. So there's all kinds of merits to the wild cucumber in its own right, but it does get a touch aggressive. And if you do have a small landscape and some really special plants, you can gently pull it off, but please don't go around town and for the sake of presuming that this thing is too aggressive and therefore invasive, just start ripping plants out of the ground. Do not do that, please, and understand what it is that you're looking at and how it behaves in the rest of the ecology and biological cycles going on around it. And you can start to recognize where there's actually really elaborate nuance between these species, and something like Marah can actually help something like Rhus integrifolia, lemonade berry, for instance, be not only a more spectacular showpiece, but also to mitigate some of that sunburn tendency and other things that one exposed shrub can be subject to on its own. Complicated landscapes are diverse landscapes, are rich landscapes, are sustainable landscapes, and they're plentiful landscapes. If you can't see them, there are bees all around me, and they're not only going after these daisies, they're also going for the wild cucumber flowers. So please, more plants, more three-dimensionality, more richness of biodiversity. Those are all good things, and there's absolutely no reason to just start ripping plants out of the ground for the sake of doing so. But there is plenty of reason, as you can see around me, to come and visit the garden while all of this stuff is still in bloom.